you guys so much for coming to this. I feel just so insanely honored that everyone is taking time out of their night to come. I'm like, career retrospective. I'm just getting started. I'm very, very humbled that everyone wanted to come and spend the night with me. Not spend the night with me, but you know what I mean? Spend the time of your night with me.
You say just getting started, and then when I look at your filmography, I'm like, my God, you have accomplished so much so quick.
Wow, thank you. I don't think so at all, but thank you.
The pages and pages of notes I have on this iPad will suggest otherwise. I'm going to start with some like early days questions first, though. The first one I've got on my list tonight is, can you recall the very first time, either a professional acting gig or something you did as a kid, the first time you did something and you noticed that acting was a creative itch that you needed to keep scratching?
I was one of those kids that there was no other choice and there was no other option. For some reason, there was never a talk about anything else. And it wasn't because my mom got me into it. It was because I was watching movies and TV shows and emulating the performances right away from like 3 years old. And it sounds pretty cliche to be like, I was putting on performances and everyone had to sit and watch. But I think what ended up happening for me was I was a really emotional kid, and I really liked, this sounds so silly, but I really liked crying, and I really liked staring at myself in the mirror and crying as a kid. And my parents were like, we need to do something about this or else she's going to end up very scary. So so we have to get her into like acting classes or something. And so that's what initially started me into acting class and dance class and vocal training and things like that. But it wasn't until I was on a soap opera. It was my first big audition. I was on a soap opera when I was 12 years old called Guiding Light. And I was never nervous to audition when I was a kid. I mean, as a kid, you don't know the pitfalls or the repercussions of anything. So I was just having the time of my life. And I got the part right away. And it was my first scene on set. And I got to do a scene that was really emotional. I'm coming back from, my character was adopted. I'm coming back to find my original birth mother, and she's there, and I get to cry to her and ask her, why did you give me up? Why don't you love me? This sounds so crazy. But as a 12-year-old kid, I realized for the first time that I could actually speak to my mom, and my mom could be that mom, and I could ask these questions that I was never brave enough as a 12-year-old to ask her. And I had that sort of moment that we all want in our acting career, which is or in our acting day-to-day life, where you leave your body and you become completely present. And I got high for the first time, which as a little 12-year-old girl, it seems great, you know, like I've never drank, I've never done drugs before, but I actually got to feel that feeling. And so after the scene was done, I said to myself, this is what I want to do. There's no better feeling than what just happened.
That's such a good story. I feel like I always ask it like, what was the creative itch you needed to keep scratching? But like calling it a high is so valid.
I guess it is valid. I don't know if it's a good idea or if it's valuable, but
there's many sorts of highs, and that feels very applicable to the craft of acting. I want to go back to something you said that made another question pop in my mind. You said you would reenact things as a kid. What was the movie or show scene you would reenact the most when you were younger?
My mom would tell me that I would become a different person every mornings, and I would carry that character on very consistently throughout the day. So if I woke up and I was Snow White, you could only call me Snow White. I was Snow White all day long. There was no way I was doing anything else, and I wouldn't leave Snow White or the character until I went to bed. And so I think that I was really committed to the art of being a character, and then the next day I was a completely different character, and Snow White was not the character that I was anymore. So I think that that's what, I don't know, solidified, I guess, my love of being really consistent with something.
Snow White is a good one. I'd be curious to hear what other ones came into the equation, like maybe especially as you got older and started to see things, and maybe had the thought cross your mind that like, when I become a professional actor one day, I want to do roles like that.
Which character or which thing?
Any character, any movie scene. Like even if you have some memorable lines of dialogue that are from your favorite movie or show that would just, I don't know, like feel really good or creatively fulfilling to be able to play with yourself then?
My mom and dad always put on romantic comedies for me when I was a kid, probably too young. And I remember watching Meg Ryan movies on a loop. And you know, when you're a kid, you sort of start understanding what personalities are, and you're watching your parents and their personalities. And I'm like, I don't want to be like that. But I do want to be like Meg Ryan. You know, she seems cute and cool. And I remember making like a definitive decision when I was like 5 or 6, being sort of drawn to a woman who had an effervescence to her and still was very smart and yet could be blonde and cute but was still very funny. And I think that Goldie Hawn, Drew Barrymore, Meg Ryan, those types of archetypal women who were very smart in their effervescence was something that I really looked up to. And so I would always sort of emulate what they were doing.
A+ people to be looking towards. I love that. You just brought up guiding light. So this question might need to be answered when you got a little older and you started to make decisions for yourself. But I always find it interesting that realizing that you want to become an actor can be one thing, but actually believing you can make it a career can be a completely different kind of situation. And I kind of want to tackle that topic from 2 different angles, the crafts perspective and then the business. So let's do craft first, the art first. Can you tell me an early gig that you booked that made you say like, I'm really good at this, and this isn't just good for this particular role that I booked, but this gives me the feeling that, you know, I'm going to go the distance in this business?
Gosh, I don't know if I ever have, and I still don't know if I'll ever go. Well, I just, it feels so weird because the distance is really far. You know,
it's so easy for an outsider, by the way, to have that kind of reaction. So I understand.
But I do know that when I was on Guiding Light, I had this really instinctual type of craft because I was a kid and I wasn't technical. I didn't even know what technique was. And so I had never taken real acting classes. I mean, my acting classes when I were a kid was like, you're in a museum and you're a mannequin and you got to stand there for like 5 seconds until someone taps you on the shoulder. You know, like still like movement work and stuff like that, but you're a kid. I had no idea what I was doing except that I guess I was instinctively doing substitution, and I was instinctively using my own childhood stuff to create this character. And so I knew I had to do this scene where my dad died on Guiding Light, and I had this, 2-page monologue that those were the days when I could memorize anything. And I just fell into something where I was really present and alive and being a kid and not judging myself. I think kid actors are really great because you're not aware of the judgment that comes in of you're doing it wrong or that's not what you learned in class, and so I do feel like those were the times on the show that I felt like, wow, I'm pretty locked into something which I can't describe, I guess. And then American Dreams was sort of the same way.
Oh, I'm going to get there in a quick second, just so I don't forget the back half of that question. So that is when it comes to the craft, but then also navigating this industry as a business can be a completely different thing. Do you remember maybe the first thing that happened, the first job you booked, the first person you met that made you think to yourself, like, I understand how this industry works, and maybe I understand what I need to do to get the kinds of roles and opportunities that speak to me most?
When I was a kid, my mom was my manager. I didn't know she was necessarily my manager a lot of the times, but I did know that she sort of constructed the business side of things. But I remember before I had gotten American Dreams, I was doing pilot season, and I was up for this movie called White Oleander, which I flew out to LA. I was, working in New York and Florida. I'd never been to LA, and I really wanted this part. I mean, it was with Michelle Pfeiffer and Robin Wright, and it's a gorgeous movie, and I really wanted it. I was a little too young for it, and I realized that I didn't want to necessarily be this sort of cutesy kid anymore. I wanted to be a serious actress because I wanted to be in those types of rooms and with that company. And so I guess the business side of it that started to come into play is that I was listening a little bit more to, we need to be out in LA, I need to be around the right people, and that took a little bit of the magic out of it, but I understand where that came from. I couldn't just be a kid on Guiding Light anymore using instincts. That could only get me so far. And I feel like, not to say that being on a soap opera isn't insanely helpful, and it was such a great, useful additive to my instrument of memorizing and being present and having to use instincts. But I kind of knew that there was a bigger business out there after that audition.
I've heard so many people describe soap operas as like a true acting boot camp, especially when it's something that you book early on in your career. You really get fed all of these lessons so quickly, and it winds up teeing you up for success with literally any genre and any type of storytelling you could tackle.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's so many great actors that come to me, Moore and Julianne Moore, and people that come, Margot Robbie, that come out of soap opera, because you have these, I mean, sometimes 20 to 30 pages of dialogue that you get that morning, or if you're lucky, the night before, and you have to be completely off book because you're only doing it twice, really. And so I do feel like the adrenaline that comes into play is really helpful, because you are completely acting on instinct and listening so closely to the other person in front of you.
So true. I lied. There was one other thing that I wanted to hit before American Dreams, and I have a couple things that are follow-ups to our last Collider Ladies Night conversation, which was a couple of years ago at this point, but a few things really stuck with me. You mentioned that you were a bad auditioner. I got a couple questions about that, because I have a feeling it's one of the most high-pressure situations there is in this industry, so I have a feeling a lot of people can relate. First thing I want to know is, do you remember the first moment that you realized that that was a challenge for you? And can you also walk us through some like tools or tactics you found that, at least helped make it better and allowed you to tee yourself up for success in those hard situations?
Wow, this is such a loaded question. And I'm looking at my agents and managers who are like, yep, she's a very bad auditioner. I'm not, I will give myself credit. I'm pretty good at self-tapes. I'm very bad at auditioning. And it has nothing to do with my, I'll give myself this credit. It has nothing to do with my talent or lack thereof. It has to do with my own head. And it has to do with the amount of pressure that I put on myself, and how self-conscious, and how I can get really into the whole experience instead of actually being generous and being sort of about the other people in the room. It's really hard for me to not want to be perfect and not want to do it right, and to not want to prove to you that I'm doing it right. I'm a people pleaser by nature, and I've learned through years that people pleasing has a lot to do now with control, and I want to control people's perceptions of me. So sometimes when I do bad at auditioning, it's because I'm trying to control what other people are thinking, instead of just being in the moment and doing my thing and making mistakes and just being like, I don't care. And I think I've wanted to be such a great actress for so long that I sort of held on so tightly that there was no room for fluidity or, and I think that's why sometimes I do badly in auditions. And so I think, like, my Hairspray audition was terrible. It was terrible. Adam Shankman still says to this day that I completely bombed the audition, because I was acutely aware of how great it would be if I got the job. And it was much more about the idea of it instead of being present in the room. And just, there's this great quote of, like, when you enter a room and you're scared, just like blast people with as much love as you can, because it's not about you. It's about them and meeting them where they're at. And I did not do that at that time when I was 20 years old. Yeah.
I might ask you to tell that. I know that story. I might ask you to tell it in a little bit. But first, there was one other question I had about your experience figuring out how to audition strongly yourself. I think at the time we were talking, you were casting Parachute, which is another movie I want to come back to later with a little more depth. But when you are an actor who recognizes that auditioning is a challenging part of the process for you, what do you like to do for the actors auditioning for your own movie so that you could help them through that situation and also get the best possible performances in your audition space?
Definitely. That was a huge part of the process for Parachute. Courtney Eaton, who is absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, I could not have done that movie without her or anyone else. She's also, and she will not knock me for giving this up, but she's also a self-admitted bad auditioner. And we have a lot in common in so many ways. And that was one of the things we related on. And in order for her to feel comfortable, and we both are bad at auditioning because of the same dynamic. It's our head. It's not her talent, or I guess not mine. But I think what I tried to do to make her feel comfortable was to just be me and her in a room, because really she only has to do the auditioning for me. And I didn't record her. I didn't have any producers in the room as well. I just sort of sat with her and ran the lines, and we just like played and acted together. And I could see right away that she could do the role without hesitation, and there was no doubt in my mind. If you take away all the constraints of having to do it perfectly and proving it to people, then I think people really feel safe, and it really is about feeling safe that you do your best work.
She's so good.
She's
so good in everything, but in particular, she is something else in Parachute. As I said, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Before I start to hit on very specific titles of yours, I do have to ask an essential SAG question. What movie or show got you your SAG card, and how did it feel to get it when it happened?
I am really bad at this. I knew this question was coming, and I don't know, because I was like 5 or 6 years old.
Fair enough. I think that's a good reason to not know.
And I mean, at that time, I was doing like Tide commercials and Nabisco commercials. I had to do a Nabisco commercial one time, and I had braces on, and this is how hardcore my mom was. I booked that commercial. I had braces on. She was like, "You're getting your braces off." So we went right to the orthodontist, and I got my braces off so I could do the Nabisco commercial. And so I don't really know which one it was, but it was definitely a commercial. Okay. I do remember, a funny story, is when I wasn't SAG, I had to do a commercial where I was in like the background or something like that. And I did realize I'm like very young at this point. I think I'm like 5. I had a very clear distinction that I wanted to be SAG, because the kids were getting better parts. They were speaking and stuff. I was like, what do you get over there in the cool club, you know? So that's all I remember.
I'll take it. I understand that. All right. Specific titles now. First one, obviously, on my list here is American Dreams. With that one, that is a really big opportunity to get early in your career. And in particular, you were number 1 on the call sheet, which is a very big deal at that point. And it was making me wonder, because you were first starting out then, going into making that show, what did you think it meant to be a good leader, to be a good number 1? And then coming out the other side, how did that definition change, if at all?
I was 15 years old when I got American Dreams. It was my second ever pilot audition. I also got the other pilot audition that I tried out for at the time. So I had no understanding that it was hard. I know that sounds so lame, because now I do. But at the time, I had no barometer necessarily for things being difficult, because I got Guiding Light right away. I got the other pilot. I got American Dreams. And so I didn't even know what number 1 on the call sheet was. And I did nail that audition, because my head hadn't really come into play at that point. And I got offered it in the room, which is sort of unheard of. And I knew was pretty special. And I didn't realize how special this show was. I think because at that time we were very ahead of our time in terms of what the show was about and the themes of what we were doing. But I realized that I did have a lot of responsibility, and things were happening really fast. I was working 15-hour days as a 15, 16, 17-year-old while going to school. I got my equivalency right away, so they could work me longer. And I felt a lot of pressure, not because I knew that I was number 1 on the call sheet, but because I was really, really hard on myself. And at that point, I was going through a lot with my mental health, and I I had no checks and balances for what really mattered. At that point, the show mattered the most. So, yeah, I really worked really hard and I had the best time also. So it was very bittersweet in a lot of ways.
You've brought up a couple times now how hard you are on yourself. I wrote this down from one of our last conversations that I really wanted to ask about. You had mentioned something that your director on Finding Amanda had mentioned to you, Peter. You said that he once pulled you aside and said to you, you really need to just have fun. And it sounds like such a simple idea, but as someone who is also quite hard on herself, like it's much easier said than done. So what kind of things were you doing then and maybe even now to, quiet your mind, be in the moment, not be buried under the pressure and, just have fun with the work you're doing?
I mean, that's a really long answer because it took me a really long time to get here where I feel like I do finally have fun and I do have to constantly check myself. I think at the time I put a lot of pressure on myself, especially after I started getting a lot of roles and working a lot when I was like 16, 17, 18. I was using a lot of probably unhealthy tools to be in this business. And then when I had to give up those tools, and they're not tools, they were bad habits. But when I had to give those things away, I was left with like, oh, I'm just supposed to do this thing and really be in my body and be present with acting. And it was not fun. It felt like sort of a mind-boggling experience. So I had to learn how to fall back in love with acting again and just realize that I've always had it. I don't have to prove it. It's very fluid when you relax into it and when it is supposed to be fun and you're supposed to take chances and you're supposed to make mistakes and you can fall down and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or you're a bad actor. All these things came with a lot of experience of knowing that I didn't die when the worst thing happened, on set, or just because I didn't get that job, it wasn't the worst thing that ever happened. And little by little, I gained the understanding that it's going to be okay. It's not the biggest deal in the world. It's supposed to be fun.
I have so many follow-up questions. The first one that crossed my mind because of the way you described that is what project or experience helped you fall back in love with acting?
I know it sounds lame because it's too like apropos, but it was Pitch Perfect actually. Because I had taken 2 years off. I was trying to get back into acting. I had some really bad experiences. I got fired from a show right away, which I now looking back, I think was warranted, because I was trying to get my footing back again and I was really nervous and I was really in my head. And so I got fired from that show and I just thought that all was lost. And then when I got Pitch Perfect, I was so grateful to be working again. I was like singing down the halls and planning parties. And, I thought I was never going to work again at that point. So showing up to work every day was just like Christmas. And there were some people that didn't feel like that. And I just was this like puppy that just tried to convince everyone how great the movie was going to be and how big it was going to be. And I felt like that camaraderie really made me fall in love with acting again as well. The fact that you're in a summer camp and you get to have these experiences and make lifelong friends, and it just really solidified why I liked doing it.
I have so many Pitch Perfect questions too. I don't want to pass Hairspray though without asking you to share that audition experience after I just teed it up for everybody. Can you tell us what happened in that audition and how you wound up getting the role?
So I did really well at the dancing part of the audition. That's never been the thing that I get in my head, mostly because I'm in my body and you're physically in your body. And I think that that is helpful for me. I work a lot with grounding techniques and things because it's hard for me to get in there. But dancing for me is not the thing. It's the singing because I'm hearing myself and I'm hearing that I'm off or that something happened. And so I just really got in my head. Adam Shakeman called me afterwards because I had worked with him on Pacifier before that, and he said that wasn't good. So really unfortunate because Michelle Pfeiffer just signed on for Velma Von Tussle, and I remembered, I know this sounds really woo-woo, but we're all actors, so maybe everyone is okay with it.
I enjoy this part of the story, which is why I ask it.
It is true. But I had gone to a psychic 2 years before when I was doing John Tucker Must Die in Vancouver, and she told me that I was going to play the daughter of an iconic blonde famous actress. She didn't say who, but she said an iconic blonde famous actress, and then that was going to change my life. And I was doing the math, and I said to Adam, that's so weird because I have written down, and I'm looking at my journal entry, that I'm supposed to play the daughter of this iconic blonde woman. I think it's probably Michelle Pfeiffer. And he was like, you're so insane. I'm going to let you audition again because if that is true, this will be a really great story one day. And he let me audition again. And I think this is the difference with me in auditioning. And this sounds really woo, but because who knows if psychics are real or not. But there was a psychic that told me I was going to do great and I was going to get the part. So I walked into that audition like, this part is mine. I'm going to get this part. A psychic told me. I'm Michelle Pfeiffer's daughter. So I nailed it and I didn't mess up at all. My voice was like a bird. And so I don't know. I think it's the feeling that you already have it. You don't have to prove it. That really helps me, I think, in terms of auditioning, and in so much of my life. I think not having to. There's this great quote in the Matthew Perry biography that I took, and it's an anecdote that it has nothing to do with auditioning, but someone that he was working with was saying to him, Matthew, you're interesting enough on your own. You don't have to prove to us that you're interesting. And I remember underlining that and being like, yeah, that's how it works with me too. Is stop trying to prove it to everybody.
I love that story. A psychic might have suggested that I go to film school, and I'm pretty sure having a film school degree is the only reason I can function in this industry. So when I heard you tell that story, I'm like, oh, like I feel so much more sound about why I made that choice now.
Sometimes that's what's helpful. I mean, who knows if it's real or not, but I do think it gives you a distinction on what your guiding force is. Obviously, she could have said that to me and I could have been like, nope, I did terribly. I'm not supposed to do that. But there was something in me that was like, you're right. I'm supposed to advocate for myself and try again.
It's like it awakens something that was already there regardless.
Definitely.
I love that. I love that. Going back to Pitch Perfect, I want to go into getting that role too. Because another thing I heard was that you were the last one to book a role in that movie. And it had hit the point where you were writing letters and you were calling people basically saying, I'll do anything to be in this movie. So I want to know what it was about that script and the people involved that made you know to your core, this is worth fighting for.
Well, obviously the script came, and I remember exactly where I was when I was reading it. I was on my very blue couch, which now in retrospect, don't know why I had a blue couch, but I was on my blue couch in my apartment, and I remember reading it and thinking to myself, the first line of the script, the very first line of the whole script, it's not in the movie, was shitballs. And it's my character because she can't find her little stewardess tie thing. And I remember being like, wow, at that time, that's not how you start a movie. And I remember thinking that it was really, really smart and intelligent and something that I hadn't read before in terms of these misfits that were very dynamic and had so much going on, and each character was so specific, and I just wanted to be a part of it. So I met with Jason Moore right away, and he was like, nobody's cast, we're just starting out. And I remember saying to him, and this is going against everything I just said about like proving it and don't be desperate. I was like, please, I'll play anybody. I'll do anything. I'll be Fat Amy. I'll be Becca. Like, I'll do anything. And he's like, okay, he was very sweet about it. But so they cast the whole movie, and I just remember them casting Rebel and them casting Anna, and me being like, oh, they're both blonde. They're not going to pick another blonde girl. There's no way. That's too many blondes. So I just knew that my chances were like dwindling with every blonde human that got cast. And so then I think it was 2 days before everyone was supposed to fly out. They cast me, and Elizabeth Banks called me on the phone and said, but we need your hair red. And I was like, I'm on my way to dye it red. So I really thought it was so special, and I knew that it was going to be something that a lot of people could relate to. When I read scripts, I always sort of think to myself, I think from a business mindset, but I also think, are people going to have their heart yearn or do something? Is it going to pull at something? And it definitely pulls at a lot of things, that movie.
Big time. One of the coolest things about not just the first movie, but all of them is that I feel like in particular because of TikTok, new generations are finding it and they're reenacting all the songs. Like what a special thing to spread something you love from generation to generation, which is not an easy thing to achieve anymore.
It's hard for me to comprehend that that's true. I just am so grateful that that's the case.
All over the place. It's something else, and I love seeing it. Going back to what you were saying earlier about how being on this set made you feel, coming out of having made Pitch Perfect, what were some lessons you learned about what you valued in an on-set environment and the people that you would work with that maybe influenced the films and shows you chose after?
After Pitch Perfect, it wasn't smooth sailing necessarily. I still was not a great auditioner. It didn't get better right away. I think I have a really funny, cute story, or not. It's not cute, but I went into an audition and I developed this sort of like anxiety thing where I couldn't really necessarily speak in auditions, and I just left the room and I was like, I'm sorry for wasting your time. And Juno Temple, who was a friend of mine at the time, was sitting outside and she was like, we need to go shopping. We need to go have fun. So we got these like friendship rings that I wore, for so many years. And she was trying to teach me and tell me about just like not caring so much. And it was just so hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that I was in this huge movie. And I think that I wanted so badly to prove to myself that I could get back to where I was before I had taken that break. And so I was really struggling, and I went to an acting coach that scared me and was mean to me, and so then I was like, I'm not going to do that again. And my agent of 20 years dropped me, and it got really scary for a second. And I thought to myself, not that I was necessarily done, but I thought that I was just going to have to pick something else to do. And so I think that what I feel most proud of with this sort of resurgence of coming back in a way is that I always knew that that wasn't going to be the case. I just, I tried to pivot in a lot of ways and pick roles that were going to be interesting and going to be things that maybe necessarily weren't going to be seen, but that I was still going to be working. I worked on a lot of indies, and I'm really proud of that work that I did, because I just wanted to keep working and little by little putting the puzzle pieces together of proving to myself that I was going to stay in this business.
Again, I have so many follow-up questions. Dear God, I hope I can remember them all. The first thing I wanted to follow up on, because you've brought up taking a break a couple of times, and I know after you came back from that break, it wasn't smooth sailing, but I do think in this industry, it's a really big deal to hit a point where, you need to prioritize self over career. So can you tell us a little bit about making that decision, deciding no, me and my headspace is more important than forging forward with the career right now?
I mean, I think as a person who really responds to substitution and Strasberg and things that you have to use your own stuff, I wasn't going to have any stuff that was going to be helpful or useful if I didn't take that break. It was only going to get really bad. And I had to be able to differentiate the mental health stuff that I was in with the fact that I had to separate it, and I had to make sure that I was using other tools and techniques and not using this pain. I had to make sure that I was separating it, and I didn't know how to do that. And so the only thing that I could tell that would work was to make sure that I knew myself really well. And at that point, I didn't really know myself. I had been an actor my whole life. I knew nothing else. I didn't know how to take care of myself in the way that I probably should have as like a 22-year-old, 23-year-old woman. And I had to learn how to put myself before my career, which was an unheard of thing because I was trying so hard to think that if I put my career before myself, then I would be happy. But it was, the antithesis to what I was really needing to do, which was taking that time to put myself before my career. And it was the only reason that I'm here, I think.
It's such a big deal. Like connecting the dots in that respect is so important. You brought up technique a couple of times, and I'm just the biggest nerd for the wide variety of acting techniques that are out there. So I'm gonna give you two-part questions about that. First, as it applies to your own work, can you tell us something that stays consistent in terms of your approach to the work from day one till now? A particular thing that you've always done, but then can you tell us a new technique you've tried for the first time more recently?
Sure. I mean, I think my technique that I can always go back to, and I after being an acting teacher, I started working a little bit with Warner Laughlin, who doesn't use necessarily this technique. She uses something completely different, and I really respect knowing a lot about that as well. But the thing that always works for me, and I can always respond to and relate to, is that all of my characters are just these portions of me that I try to understand deeper, and I put a lot of emphasis on the substitution of the things that I can relate to. And even sometimes there's things that I relate so much not to that I relate to them, if that makes any sense. But I have to find like these tent poles of things in the character so I can utilize my own experience. And that sometimes looks a lot like sensory stuff, smells, thoughts, memories that I have, music, experiences. I think that really works for me. I'm such a sensitive person that I always really respond back to that. The thing that has been helpful now, I think just getting out of my own head and doing a lot of the work beforehand. And then when I get to set, really, really letting it all go and not thinking about technique and really just being a really great listener and realizing that this is the first time that this character has ever said this and I don't want to have anything planned. I somehow in my subconscious, I have all the stuff that I've done before. I've had all the backstory. I know exactly where this girl, her basic human emotion is and where she went to college or whatever. But when I get on set, I try to just truly have fun, which is a new thing for me.
I love that. It's a beautiful thing. So the other big two-part question I love asking is, and this can be opened up to any film, any show you've ever worked on, can you tell us a scene partner you met and you had a very similar approach to the work? You're like, we are immediately in sync. But then I also want an example of the opposite, someone who came to set and maybe challenged you to adapt and try something new and for the better.
I recently worked with Claire Danes, who is my idol, and I really tried to keep it together all day, every day. And only until recently she realized how crazy I am about her and her work. My best acting performance was her not knowing that I am in love with her. Awards. But I think the way that she approaches acting, we really related to in a lot of ways. She started when she was young as well, and she's not a technical actress as well. It is so here. It's right here all the time, and she's so available and alive and present, and getting to realize that you can make these big, bold choices, and if they're honest, then there's not too much. I had all these. That scary acting teacher kept telling me that I was too big and too much and too fill in the blank. Oh, my favorite thing she said was that I was too much like a bunny. you're never going to work. You're like a bunny. You're just hopping around and you're too soft and your voice needs to change and your voice needs to be lower. You need to be a jaguar. And I was like, a jaguar? I don't know any people that want to go watch a jaguar for 2 hours. Like, bunnies are cute. I kind of want to hang out with a bunny. She was not into me being a bunny. But anyway, I think that the cool thing to answer your question about Claire is that she shows up exactly as the character and there is no to anything. She is exactly, and she doesn't judge herself when she's in those moments. And so getting to work with her on Beast in Me that's coming out soon was such a huge experience. And then I'm not going to name names, but I've worked with people who are very strategic in their choices and they made them beforehand. And that freaks me out a little bit. Like if you say the line the same time or the same way every single time, but that does work for a lot of people. And I think that that's been really helpful for me to learn too, because I have to respond and I'm going to respond differently sometimes because now I'm getting increasingly freaked out that you're saying it the same way. So I do change, my tactic a little bit when people do that. And I do think it's a challenge and something that actually really stretches me.
Love those answers. There's one other person I did want to make a point to ask you about. It kind of goes back to Pitch Perfect. So I was telling you before, one of the last SAG career retrospectives I had the honor of moderating was for Anna Kendrick. So just to highlight her a little here, can you tell me maybe the first thing you saw in her while working on Pitch Perfect that made you think to yourself, like that right there is not only someone I would like to keep working with, but someone who will also be a good friend for me?
I mean, we are the antithetical of each other. You couldn't have two people be more opposite in terms of everything about us. And I think that's why we're friends. Same thing goes with our mentalities on set. I mean, that girl is cool as a cucumber. She does not care about, like she's just there to do the work and she's having fun. But I think I overthink a lot. And I think that's why we work really well, is that I kind of bring her up and she keeps me grounded. And getting to watch her work and playing opposite of each other. I think that's why sometimes those scenes really work, is that you're getting the yin and yang of two different girls in college, in one shower. Because, and maybe you can see yourself a little bit in both, of somebody who's just overly excited and talking way too close to you, or someone who just wants, to chill and back away. And I think that's why we complement each other.
I'll use her as a segue to lean back into Parachute and you directing, because I like seeing her soar as a director. And truly, that movie was something else. The last we spoke for Ladies Night, I had only seen your short, and I thought it was great. And then finally getting to see the finished feature film, really an accomplishment. So I'll start with a big two-part question, because this is an industry that has a habit of boxing people into one thing. So there's many people who work in film and television that wear multiple hats, but more often than not, someone is known for one thing and one thing alone. So can you tell me something about the process of getting your first feature off the ground that, one, was maybe more challenging because people only saw you as an actor, but then can you also give me an example of the opposite, something that was even better on that movie because of all the experience you had working as an actor?
I think my entire career in a little bit has been sort of, and I think that sort of embeds itself into the wanting to prove to people and prove to myself, because I have been put into a little bit of box. And I think us all as actors know that that's sort of part of the course of, I think it makes people feel safer when they are like, oh, that's the person who does this type of part, or she's really good at this type of thing. And, it's hard to not put yourself in that box and to start believing that. And I think at that time in my life, I really wanted to explore different parts of myself and get really rigorous and honest, and to do something that I felt like I had like a bleeding need to do in terms of this story that I hadn't seen. And an experience that I felt was the epitome of why I was even an actor and why I was here and why I'm here today is because what Parachute is about is exactly the truth of what happened. I went through that mental health struggle and I came out even better because of it. And so I wanted to see a movie that could maybe help someone else. But in order to do that, I knew I needed to study and I needed to make sure that I wasn't winging it or half-assing anything. So I, during COVID, put myself through a little mini film school and studied as much as I could and watched as many movies as I could and just really tried to, I guess, find ways to psychologically explore like what I was trying to say and the themes that I was trying to say. So I hope that I got myself out of that box, but that was never really my purpose in doing it. It was more that I needed to tell that story.
I have another Parachute question, but just because you brought up the box again after I did, but another question that I had truly written down was how much I appreciate the variety in your work. It feels like you've worked in every genre. There's like the college comedy and Pitch Perfect. You've got a good deal of horror. You know how much I love X, and look at what you're doing right now. So I guess the question about that might be, what are you actively able to do in your career as an actor to ensure that you have that variety and maybe don't get pushed into just one thing? Because again, I feel like I've seen that in your body of work for quite a while.
I wish it was strategic. I wish it was, because it would seem really smart of me and my team being like, but I think that the only thing strategic about it is that we really do try to focus in on things that I know I already am, that maybe people haven't seen. This is another facet of my personality, of something that I am itching to do, that I know that I'm good at, that I can't wait to show people, that I can do comedy, that I can do horror, that I can be big and bold and have big hair and be, a huge personality, or I can be in an indie movie and be really small. I think I always just go for the material first, and it always emulates and sort of reflects something that I'm going through in my life, weirdly, at the time, even if I find out what it is after. And yeah, I've just been really, really thankful that they've all been so different, because I get bored and this has never been boring for me. So
it's the beauty of this industry and this line of work. To follow up on that a little, what is something that still remains on your acting bucket list?
So much. That's why it was like, I kind of didn't want to do this. I mean, I would have, of course,
manifest something.
No, but I was like, do the career retrospective, because I was thinking, oh my God, what do I have to say? Patricia Arquette and Carrie Coon and Demi Moore and all these people are just with these long careers, and I'm over here thinking, I'm just getting started. Like, I can't wait to do so many more things. I think that I have so more in me than not that people haven't even seen yet that I know I can do. And that's what kept me going. That's what got me better. That's what kept me here, because of these roles that I have yet to be a part of.
We'll get more specific with
that. Okay, I'll get more specific.
If you could learn a new skill or about a different profession through a role, what would you choose and why?
A different profession? I mean, I think the next phase that I really am excited to play, also in my life one day, but I think is to be a mom, to be a mother, to sort of go into those spaces where you're not just the extension of a man in a movie or a TV show, or you're not having like a quarter life crisis or a midlife crisis by being a woman in the workplace, but what does it mean to be a woman in this world who is, a wife in the workplace and also a mother? I think having all of those things at the same time is really interesting to me, because it seems, in my perspective, because I don't have kids, like just insurmountable and so challenging. And so I can't wait to play women who have overcome a lot of those obstacles in terms of being a mom.
I like that. Speak it into existence. And then when we do Career Retrospective Part 2, we'll talk about that opportunity. Going back to Parachute, because I don't want to leave this question unasked. As an actor directing her first feature, I'm curious, big two-part question again. Sorry, I can't help myself. What is something that a director did for you in the past that you really appreciated and back-pocketed and incorporated into your own process? But then can you also tell us something that maybe you wish more directors did for their actors that you made sure to give your cast on that film?
The first part of the question, I guess, I shadowed some of my friends when I was getting ready to direct. When I was sort of gearing up to direct, because then COVID happened and I couldn't follow anyone and no one was following anyone around. And my friend Maggie Kiley, who is a proficient TV director, I followed her around, and I was really, really impressed with the specificity of her planning and the intention in terms of the psychology of her shot choices, how everything was making the audience feel a certain way. She had sheets and spreadsheets, and that was something I utilized a lot with Parachute, is that every single person on the crew had a binder, which is not good for the environment, but we're going to talk about that later. But they had photos of what we were doing, the colors that we were using, the songs that I was listening to when I wrote it. Everything was in front of them, because I think it's a visual sort of medium that I really think a lot of more directors should utilize, that we were always on the same page. No one really had to be like, oh, I wonder if this shot, goes with the rest of the tone of the movie. It was in the binder. And I got that from Maggie. So I took that to heart. And then a director friend of mine, Jack Cron, gave me a list of questions that I, through every scene, would answer to myself every night about the next scene for the next day. And that was a lot of work. I don't know if I would do that again, because it was a lot of writing and a lot of homework that I did after every night. But it really made me clear going forward for the next day with the scenes of the intention. Is it honest? Is it interesting? Is it going back to the theme of the movie? What are the beats? What are the substitutions? I mean, all of that stuff was laid out for me. So that was really helpful. What do I wish that directors would do that I did? Is that the question?
Yeah, like as an actor, something maybe you wish you received more from an actor's director that you tried to add to your process, or your cast would have it.
Since I am an actor, I think I really gave them a lot of latitude to change the dialogue and do improv. And there's so many scenes that are in the movie that were not written. I think that I knew that their chemistry and what was going on between them was way more interesting than whatever I wrote. So I would give them sort of little things to say that I needed to make sure, because the story had to happen, that they needed to be a part of the scene. But then I really let them play a lot, and I think that there wasn't a lot of constraints to what they were doing, and I think that was very helpful, and it's some of my favorite stuff that's in the movie. So I wish that directors sometimes would let us, and sometimes they do, but not all of them.
Everyone's process is different. Everything is valid. All right. Before I veer into some of the newer titles, I got a couple questions from the crowd here. I specifically wanted to save one for last. This first one here is from Nikki. What role taught you the most about yourself as an actor? What was your biggest takeaway from a role?
Where's Nikki? Oh, hi, Nikki. Thank you. What was my biggest takeaway from a role?
Or which one did you learn the most about yourself through?
My role that I learned the most about myself. I did this movie called The Vicious Kind a long time ago. I was like 23 years old. I was alone for the first time. It was Vicious Kind, and also this movie called Blackwater Transit that never came out. It was with Lawrence Fishburne and Carl Urban, and they both happened sort of succinctly. And I was 23 on both of them, and both of them were the first time that I was alone doing these parts without, a chaperone or my parents or friends or, anybody. I was just sort of going through all of the stuff that I was going through, and I was working on these movies. And I'll talk about Blackwater Transit. Blackwater Transit, the director was Tony Kaye, who directed American History X, and he's very iconic, I guess, for lack of a better word. And he made me play this character that had all these different personalities, all these different wardrobe changes. She was in all these different time periods. I had to keep a journal for every single one of my personalities, which was crazy. And I had absolutely no control of the outcome of the movie because I had no idea what was going on. And so I really had to trust the process that the director was going to be creating this visual masterpiece in a way, and that my job was to do all these characters and bring truth to all of these different personalities that she had, and write in all the journals and create all this stuff. And a lot of the other actors on set really didn't like where the movie was going because they couldn't understand it. And I think for me, it was the first time that I really learned about myself to trust the process, and that if I knew I was doing good work, then I had to let go of the outcome, because as an actor, it's such an editor's medium and it's such a director's medium. You can do the best take of your entire life and then you're watching the show. This happens to me all the time. And I'm like, why did they use that one? I know the take that I did really well and it's not in there. And you can get so, I talk about this with my managers all the time. You can get so frustrated that you can't control the outcome. And I think that was the first time I realized that there is no controlling that. It's really just about the reason why you're doing it, which is the experience, which was the creating this art with all these different people and learning from this man who was, I mean, a legend. And if he wanted me to talk in a weird accent and sit on a couch in the middle of the ocean with pearls, I did that. I don't know. Not to say that that made any sense, but I think that I learned a lot about myself, about the type of actor I wanted to be.
Great answer. Great question. Thank you for that. This one comes from Jonathan. Can you tell us about a time you took a big risk in your career that paid off immensely?
Jonathan? Oh, hi. You couldn't be closer. A big risk in my career, I'm going to say Hunting Wives actually was a pretty big risk. I had never really... Well, X and Hunting Wives. I want to say that both of them sort of were similar in the way that I was breaking out of a box that I think a lot of people had put me in. Hunting Wives, I knew that I wasn't necessarily familiar with the that Starz was doing it, or the type of show. I had never done something that campy, that broad, and I hadn't done TV in a really long time. And it was weirdly, because this never happens, offered to me. And that goes into my people-pleasing mindset as well, where I think I don't have to prove to anybody that I need to get it. They just want to give it to me. Are you guys sure? So I guess I just had to take a risk on myself, that I had already done the work, that I had already proven myself, and that I was going to try out this new type of genre. And I guess it paid off.
Yeah. Big time. We'll get to Hunting Wives, but I'm just going to try to manifest more horror for you.
Oh, yeah.
You know how I feel about X?
Yeah.
It's quite like Prom Night.
Yeah.
I want more. All right. This next one I saved for last for a reason. It's from Megan. Puts the pressure on a little bit, but I like this too. Would you like to direct on Hunting Wives this season? And then Megan also writes, what's your favorite murder true crime podcast?
Oh my God, I have so many. Like recently of all time. Where's Megan? Oh, also right here. It's like there's not many seats, so I guess that makes sense. I think I would want to direct. I'm not going to direct this season. I really, really care about this show, and I want to make sure that it's done. There's a lot of pressure on this season, and so I feel like that was a big... Also, they didn't ask me to. But if let's say they did, and yeah, season 3, I think I probably would. I think once we get into a little bit more of a footing of, wow, people are actually watching this, I think that will be helpful for us all. But I do really want to direct. I do want to direct again, and I've never directed television before, so I would definitely do that. That would be a challenge for me. And my favorite murder podcast, I mean, I'm going to say the Murdoch Murders podcast by Mandy Matney because I'm playing her. But I mean, there's this new podcast. It's not a murder podcast. It's called The Telepathy Tapes. Have you guys heard about it? Right? Crazy. It's so fascinating. I'm into all that sort of supernatural stuff and also like mental health and stuff like that as well. But it's not supernatural. And then I'm listening to this one called Culpable right now by Tenderfoot TV. Tenderfoot TV, if you need another podcaster, give me a job. Yeah.
I'll always take a recommendation. All right, let's dig into Hunting Wives full force now. So you brought up that the role was offered to you. When that opportunity comes your way, what is something about the material, whether it's the overall story or the character, that makes you say to yourself, like, this feels like the right fit for me right now. I need this kind of role creatively for myself.
Well, I will preface it with saying that I'm sure it wasn't offered to me without my team doing some work. And they always have and always have done such a great job for me. And I'm not just saying that because they're in the room. But I love them so much. And I do know that every time there's an offer, it's always sort of with a little bit of, did you see the short film that she's in that got nominated for an Oscar? You know, and that had just come out like 2 weeks before. So I think that had a little bit of something to do with it. And I'm very proud of that short film and everything that it stood for. And so when I got the scripts, I was in Thailand shooting, and I just read all the scripts, all 8 of them right away. And I remember emailing everyone and saying, like, let's get this. I don't know how we're gonna do it, but let's get this one, because I couldn't put it down. And I just knew that there was this character that I really related to. I related to, with everything that I've already said and shared too much, that there was a woman at the helm of the whole thing that felt like she was putting herself in a box and keeping herself caged, and was very excited and fearful of what was going to happen if she opened the cage. And I really related to that. And I really related to that feeling of keeping yourself very safe and wound really tightly, sort of like how I am in auditions, and what happens when you let that go, and who do you become if that, becomes your new persona. And I think that she does that, and it doesn't turn out good for her so far, but there's other seasons. I hope that she...
Yeah, I got questions about the ending of the season, but I want to veer off track just very briefly. And I'm not just asking this because they are in the room, but you have brought up your team quite a few times tonight, and I feel like that's something that we don't talk nearly enough about. Can you tell us something about your team that you really appreciate, that makes sure that they don't just get you work, but gets you work that really speaks to you, the artist you want to be now and the artist you want to be in the future?
I think they're really, really good people at the forefront of the whole thing. And I think they get me as a person. It's sort of like what we value in our life aligns, all of them. I wasn't always with those types of people. And I think that is, if there's something that's going on with me emotionally, they care more about that than they care about me getting the job. And that's not always the case. And I think at the end of the day, we're really lucky to do this, and it's the best job in the world, but it is a job, and you have to take care of yourself first. And I just think they really care. I mean, I've been in situations before where people haven't really believed in me and haven't seen what could happen. I mean, I was talking about how my agent of 20 years, she took me out to drinks and said, "You're never going to make it. You need to give up. I hope you prove everyone wrong, but you're not going to make it." And everyone else, stuck with me and didn't agree with that. And I didn't agree with that. And I think that having a team that, even if you're going through a spell of maybe not working for, however long is too long for you, who understands your worth, not only as an actor, but as a human, I think that's all that really matters.
Such an important thing to emphasize. I'm so happy you have those vibes in your corner now. Back to Hunting Wives. You mentioned... I I had to do a nice little detour that's very well deserved. But you mentioned before that you read the scripts and you knew like I got to do this. But I'm also curious about the moment when I guess you realized it would be the phenomenon that it has become. Is that something you could ever feel on a set, or is it just like, this is working and I have hopes? Or, I mean, can you predict anything like that?
I think on Pitch Perfect, when I read the script, I knew it was special. I didn't know that it was going to be what it became. But with Hunting Wives, we genuinely didn't think anyone was going to see it. So we were just having fun. And I think that lent itself a lot to the tone of the show and how close we got. We were just having so much fun. We had no pressure. And I think that was sort of a lightning in a bottle situation because of what the show explored and us all getting along and how much trouble it was and all the rules we broke. So no, I had no idea.
So many follow-up questions yet again. Before I veer too far away from your specific character, I love, and this might not be the way you work, but I had another actor describe the process to me this way recently, and it's kind of just ingrained itself in my brain. She was explaining that when she starts a new TV show, she feels like she's on unstable ground, doesn't quite know who the character is, but then has that thing happen where now she does something or even just thinks of something either in prep or on set, and she just knows to her core, I have figured out who they are now. Did you have that with Sophie, and if so, when?
That's a good question. I mean, I do agree with that, actually. I think, and Claire, so it is okay that I'm saying this because Claire Danes said it too. I do think on every first day of any set of anything I ever do, I'm always like Bambi with the ice sort of thing where I'm like, oh no. And I think that once you start to get your footing a little bit, then you get into like a flow state and you start receiving information instead of putting it out. And I think that's where I really thrive is in the receiving and then and I think that I did have that with Sophie where it was sort of at the beginning when she's at the I hate to say NRA rally. Words we shouldn't say. But it's in the show. Anyway, she's at the rally and I think that there's all of those things are happening at once. They cut out some of it, but she's having a panic attack. She's got anxiety. She has opinions, but she's being funny about it. And I think like being a strong woman who has opinions, but it's also using humor to deflect or to sink into something. I think all those things happening at once was the first time that I felt really comfortable. I was like, I know how to do this type of woman, and I've been here before, not to an NRA rally, but I've been here in this state emotionally, and I think once you connect to that type of person and you can build upon that and sink into those parts of yourself that you can relate to, it gets way easier.
That moment might answer this question too, but because you brought up how unique the tone of the show is, I am also curious about having your aha moment with that, because it's the kind of show that's like wildly heightened and entertaining because of it. You have some great comedic beats, but at the same time, we have to care about the characters and actually feel the stakes. So do you remember the first moment you kind of figured out how to do it all at once?
Thank you. I realized though my job was going to be the straight girl, even though,
Yep.
But she's the one that has to be the audience's viewpoint. She has to go into the situation and be, pretty grounded so everyone can really shine in the grandiosity of the whole thing. But I think that was really difficult sometimes because I wanted to be big and I really wanted to use a Southern accent and I couldn't. I think that was my biggest challenge with the whole thing was not trying to push anything, was trying to stay really truthful to every experience. And I think I started to realize the tone, especially working with the incredible Katie Lowe's and Jamie Ray Newman and Malin Ackerman. I mean, there's a part where, I hope you can bleep this out, but Katie, says like, "You cunts," out of, and what? Who says that? On a show. And so I sort of started to gather information a little bit as we were going on, like, oh, this is really heightened. And I think for me, I needed to stay my course and keep grounded, because I think if I was heightened too, the audience feels like maybe they would lose their footing as well.
I can't believe how well you all nail that, and just like the variety in tone and like the variety in big swings you take throughout the show. I'll get to some of the ending big swings in a moment, but first I want to stick with your ensemble here, because this also feels like a show that like it can't work unless the casting is pitch perfect. I wish I had done that on purpose. I didn't. The casting here is absolutely perfect. So do you remember the very first time you were on set and looked around at your co-stars and went to yourself, like the vibe is right. We are really the perfect fit for these characters?
I do. I went out to dinner with Malin right away, because we were like, we're about to get naked together, so we might as well get tacos. So we went out to dinner before we started shooting, and she does really exude not a Margot energy at all, but it is very calming. It's very seductive. It's very interesting, and she's very capable in everything she does. And I just was in awe of everything that was happening. So I realized that was going to work. And I also, what I really realized during that time, and also through rehearsals, was that we all got along really well, and we all really respected each other, and we were laughing the whole time. There was no egos. There was no like, oh, you're number one on the call sheet, and I wish I was doing this, and you got that. None of that. There never was. And I think that it was so special to me and rare, unfortunately, that we were having so much fun on those days where we were all together. And I think that lent itself a lot to the show.
All right, that put one of my favorite questions in my head, because, you have a lot of fun, but sometimes making TV shows, making movies is hard work. So I always like to, take a pause to recognize, I guess, the moments of joy we have on set. So can you pinpoint the single day of making Hunting Wives Season 1 that, I don't know, brought you the most joy or just filled you up the most as an artist?
There's two sort of days. All the days that we're together were really special, when we're making those terrible margaritas, or when we're doing like scenes that were all sort of, the camaraderie between us all. But on the other side of that, I had some really incredible scenes with Graham, with Evan, who I know everyone hates, but Evan's amazing, where we were talking about really serious things, and we had a totally different TV show on our hands. A lot of these scenes got cut, but that's not why we do them. I was doing them because they were some of the most intense scenes about what we were expecting as parents, what we were expecting as a woman, as a man, as what we both wanted from each other. And I felt really connected to those scenes, and we were just sobbing and, hugging and the whole thing. And I feel like afterwards, those are the scenes that you go home and you're like, I'm an actor, I'm going to like pour myself a glass of wine and like, I did it, and then they got cut. But I really love those types of scenes when you feel like you've exhausted this part of your brain and your soul that you're like, those things that happened in my life were meant to happen now because it makes sense for this scene.
Given the variety of tones in the show, and also the way that you describe the relationship between your characters and that type of material, I'm eager to ask you this now. Of everyone in the Hunting Wives ensemble, can you pinpoint the two co-stars who have the most polar opposite approaches to their work, where when you're their primary scene partner, you're going to get a different acting experience?
As opposed to someone else getting a different experience? Or
for you, like what the energy and how they like to work, basically making them a very different kind of scene partner for you. Like two people that have different approaches to the work.
Oh, okay. I guess Jamie Ray is it. I think it sort of reminded me that she's going to love this comparison. I've never said this to her face. But I did a movie with Al Pacino that's really bad. And he would say this too, but I did it because I wanted to work with Al Pacino. And Al, I can't just say Al, but I guess I can. Al, when he was doing his scenes, like he would, everything would be a part of the scene. I mean, the way he was, there was no ending, there was no cutting, there was no action. It was like, you're not talking about, how are you doing today as Brittany? You're talking about as the character. He's not method, but it's just all happening all at once. And I think that that's really helpful because I never knew when he was acting and not acting. And then did they call action? I'm not sure, but you have to be on your toes. And I really loved working like that. And Jamie Ray does a little bit of that, which I really appreciate. And then, Katie Lowe's, on the other hand, will be talking about, having chicken the night before and feeding her kids. And then she's like right into Jilly Bean and having a Southern accent. And it's so fast that you're like, wait, we were just talking about chicken. So I think that those are two polar opposite types that I really enjoy both.
I have like a silly follow-up because I was just watching this the other night. Season 2, you should be on Wheel of Fortune with all them. Did anyone else watch that but me? It was great.
I would be really bad at that, I think. Mostly because I can't spell very well.
It's an important thing to be able to do for Wheel of Fortune. We'll pick another game show for season 2. We got to keep the variety going. To hit on maybe another scene or two of season 1. Going into filming, was there a particular scene that you thought would be the hardest for you? And ultimately, was that the toughest of the bunch, or did a different scene wind up catching you by surprise?
I did think the intimate scenes were going to be the hardest for me for a multitude of reasons. And they weren't the hardest because I was with Malin. I felt very safe. It was very freeing in a way to get out of my own way and just to have fun. I mean, what a, way to summarize that whole anecdote that I said earlier. I think the harder scenes that I really usually enjoy doing were like the breakdown scenes where they got cut out of the show, but there's a scene where I'm having like a breakdown and I start hitting myself and screaming and crying and freaking out, and I love usually doing that stuff. But it was really hard that day because I unfortunately do bring my own stuff into it. And so I did find that was the hardest, and that was something that I was actually looking forward to as a release. So you never really know, actually. It probably would have varied on a different day.
That's why I asked the question. You never know. And sometimes it's the thing that you think is going to be the simplest to do that winds up being the most difficult. I feel bad for anybody who hasn't. You've all seen all of Hunting Wives, right? All right, I'm going to start to veer towards, I don't know, maybe the end, or just touching on like the multitude of twists and turns for your character in this show. Is there any particular script you read where like a decision she made shocked you and you kind of had to like sit with it for longer than other ones and just really process it in order to understand why she would do what she did?
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, I think I really struggled with her lack of connection to her child, I guess, or that she would drink and drive. That's a big one. Or go, see a murderer after she knows that she's a murderer. But I feel like those were all things that I sort of understood that if they didn't happen, the show wouldn't exist in a way. So I had to take my own self out of it and also take my business brain out of it and sort of give up the outcome. I knew that people were going to be like, she's dumb. But I also had to, I'm not a writer on the show. I'm there to do a job, and she's a little dumb.
Every time I want my favorite characters to make better decisions and live happily ever after, then I stop and remind myself I wouldn't have a show if they did that.
Exactly, yeah.
I'll ask one more Hunting Wives questions before veering into Murdoch, Death in the Family. So looking ahead, is there any particular thing you accomplished making season 1 that, jumping into what I'm going to assume is very ambitious material with season 2, would make you think, like, if I could do that with the character, I can do anything?
If I can do that with the character going into season 2.
Something you accomplished in season 1 that you think will give you confidence to maybe level up or push it even further with your performance in season 2.
I think that, you know, and I've asked for this a little bit, I really value women who are all these different shades of gray and aren't just one note. I feel like in the beginning of season 1, you see this woman who's very caged in a lot of ways. And then I think as it's getting released, I asked Rebecca, you know, let's see what a woman who, you know, is living her life and she's in her 40s, what happens if you just pull out the crazy and all hell breaks loose? Like, what happens? What would everyone like to see if they could do what's in their mind when they, you know, want to be released in a lot of ways? And I think that that will be really freeing for a lot of women, because I think we're all sort of living out this fantasy with this show. I mean, it's escapism, it's a mirror, it's all these different things, but really we're getting to see these characters because we kind of want to do what they're doing too. Some things not. But I think with Sophie, I'm really excited for her to just go for these things that she's always felt have been holding her back. And I think a lot of people will relate to that, I hope.
Seeing that show take off is something else. Like, especially because what I mentioned with like Pitch Perfect on TikTok, I'm sure you've seen all the videos on there about hunting wives now. There's a lot.
There's a lot. We didn't realize it would be so ubiquitous, and it would be so, mocked in a good way. I guess it's a form of a compliment. So I just want to tell everybody out there that like did a TikTok that I've seen a lot of them. Yeah.
People are very excited about that show. And then also we have to get into Murdoch, Death in the Family, because that one, I believe at the time we're doing this Q&A, I think episode 4 is available. So we haven't gotten to the end of that. So I want to go back to the beginning and I guess highlight some of the early conversations you had with the real Mandy, who I know you did get to meet with considerably. And you've spoken with a lot recently because I've watched a lot of those interviews. Surprise, surprise. I'll give you a 2-part question about chatting with her. Can you tell me maybe a question that was really important to you to ask her in order to give your best possible portrayal of her? But then can you also tell us something that she told you that wound up influencing your performance more than you ever could have imagined at the start?
Well, funny enough, they're pretty much the same answer. I think it was really important to me to not play Mandy as just this sort of one-note archetype of a reporter who, in most thrillers, there's always a reporter who needs to get the job done and she'll stop at anything and she's wearing a pencil skirt. And I think it was really important to me when I met with Erin Lee Carr and Michael D. Fuller, who the showrunners and the creators, that I wanted to make sure that we weren't filling that sort of archetype, because it is a real person. She's not really like a normal reporter. I mean, she is, you know, sort of the duality of her is that she's really perky and funny and cute, and she also is very intelligent and gets the job done. And as a woman, you can be all of those things. And I really wanted to ask her the questions of what makes her tick. Why was she so dog with a bone and dogged in her quest for this family when she wasn't necessarily connected to them? Why did she zero in on this case and met with such adversity, never stopped? And the answer that I learned is the answer to your question is that she, you know, in her childhood went through something that was very traumatic with her family, and she really had a connection to mothers that have lost children, and I think she really wanted to make sure that never happened to another family, and so she really gave her all to these women who lost their children in this case. And that was something that I think really embedded and infused a lot of my decisions in playing her, and why she's so steadfast in her quest.
Is this the first time you're playing a real person?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is that more intimidating than portraying a totally fictional character, or does having the real person in your corner, I guess, give you even more confidence?
It was sort of all of the above. It was very intimidating because sometimes she would be on set and it wasn't necessarily like I was nervous to do a bad job. I didn't want to let her down. I didn't want to not serve the story to the best of my ability. I already told her I'm not going to do an imitation of you. I'm going to create an essence of all of these characteristics that I've gathered from us hanging out and things I've read. I've read her book twice and obviously listened to the podcast multiple times. And so I thought it would be a disservice to create sort of a caricature, but what I wanted to do was create this essence of who she was. And so then when she was on set, I felt intimidated that I was letting the story down or letting Sandy Smith down or Mallory Beach or any of these people that are going through such hard times, because it's a real story. But I really liked playing a real person, also because she's alive. You can ask her any question and she's right there.
What is the secret sauce to what you just described? Making sure that you are honoring her and respecting the true events, but also finding ways to make this TV version of hers uniquely your own and not an imitation. That feels like the $1 million question with something like this.
Definitely. And I thought there was a lot of countless nights about that because I wanted her voice to be specific to her physically and emotionally. I wanted her mannerisms to be very quintessentially hers, that you could tell when you looked at her. But I also wanted to make sure that it was honest to me. And so I had to make sure that they were versions of myself as well, that I sort of, infused in a way. Because if they weren't honest to me, then I was doing an imitation. And so I felt like I thought about that a lot and sort of got to the real honesty of why she was making the decisions that she was making. And that was helpful.
This feels like a challenging question to ask because, again, the show is running right now, but I did kind of want to reference a couple of scenes, maybe by using the same question I posed with Hunting Wives. Is there a particular scene that intimidated you most going in, and was that the toughest to get just right the way you wanted?
Yeah, this sounds very funny now that I'm saying it, but one of the scenes that I did that was really challenging was also cut. I'm getting really used to this, but it's partly in there. There's a little bit in there, but Mandy is describing the reason why she is so inspired by Sandy Smith and by the case and by wanting to help her. She's talking about her own brother. And I think that was really difficult because Mandy was there, and I'm talking about something that really happened to her when she was a child. And I knew how important that was, not only for the story, but for her who has lived this. And I was really proud of myself because I think it really encapsulated the pain that she felt and the reason that she became a journalist. And it is proven now to myself that that's the reason that, you do these things, is for the moment afterwards when I ran out to her and she was crying, and not because it got to air on television.
For the record, just because you brought it up a couple times now, and I think about this often, anytime a scene like that gets cut from a film or show, I feel like it's not long lost because it lives in your bones, and whether it's directly influencing the show or not, we could still see it coming through in the scenes that remain.
Oh yeah, and it's the part of the scene is in there, the beginning of it is, and when I was on Parachute and I directed, there was so many scenes that I cut that I loved, that were the best performed scenes by Courtney and Thomas, and I had to cut them because they didn't serve the overarching story, or they didn't flow, or there's one take where her hair is crazy, things like that. So I do try not to take it personally because I do understand the other side of it.
Not about cutscenes, and we have to wind down in a moment. I want to make sure to squeeze in my favorite last question, but is there a particular film or show that we haven't discussed tonight that you wish got a wider audience than it did? Just anything you want to highlight, so if someone in here has not seen every single thing you've done, they can go home and watch something that you're especially proud of.
Oh, gosh, I'm proud of a lot of the stuff that I've done. I think I'm probably the most proud of Parachute, which I'm not in. I directed because it really is my heart, and it really is the most true encapsulation of me. And yeah, I think that probably is, which is funny because I really do find myself as an actress first, and I'm not in that one. But I also can't wait to play a character like that. And I think my next goal would be to write something and direct something that I'm also in.
Speak it into existence. I love that. Again, career retrospective round 2. We will cover that as well. I have to make this my last question. It's something I really wanted to ask you because the last time you were on Collider Ladies Night, this wasn't the official last question of the show, and I've grown kind of obsessed with it because I have a problem doing this, so now I force other people to. In film and television, we give each other awards. That's wonderful. I think we should keep on doing that. I find that nobody stops to tell themselves good job as much as they should. So can you tell me something you accomplished either on Murdoch or The Hunting Wives that you know you're always going to be able to look back on and say to yourself, you know what, I'm really damn proud of what I did there?
I mean, as we can probably tell through this entire conversation, I'm really hard on myself, and there's been a lot of ups and downs. But I was taking a walk today with my dog, and I was thinking about coming here, and I did have the thought in my head, like, damn, Britt, I'm so proud of you. Like, I can't believe, I don't want to get emotional. I can't believe I'm back. Like, I made it. And not only like professionally, but emotionally and all those things, and I'm very proud of myself.
Incredibly well deserved, and also like you said earlier, it's only the beginning. So many more things to come, and I can't wait to watch and celebrate it all. Thank you for being here tonight and sharing some of your experience with us.